Moscow. For most of us, the Russian capital is one of the remote, mysterious corners of the world. Distant, unfamiliar, and only since the end of Soviet communism, easily accessible to foreigners. But for some, this is only a point of departure, the beginning of what could be the last great overland journeys in this age of the jet. Yaroslavsky Station. This is where the longest train rides in the world start. No wonder passengers are weighed down like pack mules. They are embarking on the Trans-Siberian Railroad, headed for another continent or other worlds. And they will be riding the rails for nearly a week. These passengers are boarding a train called the Vostok. That's Orient in Russian, and it is an express. But don't confuse it with the aristocratic Orient Express that carried passengers in luxury from London to Venice. This is a workhorse of a train. It's crowded, it's not very comfortable, and it's slow, chugging along at an average of only 35 miles an hour. There's nothing gracious or elegant about the Vostok, but it takes us to fabled lands that we've heard about since childhood. Until recently, the barriers of international politics kept foreigners out. Now the gates are open, and it's all aboard for the domains of Genghis Khan. There are actually 3 routes on the Trans-Siberian Railroad, 2 Russian, 1 Chinese. One goes from Moscow to Vladivostok, 5,806 miles, 6.5 days, and 8 time zones away. A second goes along the same tracks, but leaves Russia after almost 4,000 miles and swings through Manchuria, down to the Chinese capital of Beijing, a total of 5,626 miles. The Chinese branch starts at Beijing, plods through the Great Wall, and climbs up through the Gobi Desert into the Mongolia of Genghis Khan and Marco Polo. On to Siberia, and the main line tracks and west to Moscow, 4,916 miles. The Beijing-bound Vostok is a rumbling, creaking, clanking time capsule. People are thrown together, not for hours as on a plane, but for days and nights, seemingly without end. Just a break of from 10 to 25 minutes every few hours at some station in the wilderness. To stretch your legs and buy something to snack on, breathe in some good freezing air, and look around. Then it's back on board for humans and others. You don't want your dog to get left behind here. Even Lassie might not find her way home. With a little help from the conductor and some not-so-common courtesy, everybody makes it. The locomotive is electric, a Skoda made in what used to be Czechoslovakia. The system changes to diesel toward the end of the run as the Vostok approaches China. It's no youngster, but the engineers know how to baby it and keep it rattling along. It doesn't have to do much strenuous uphill work. Most of the way it's pretty flat. And where mountains did get in the way of the tracks, the Russians made long detours rather than go to the expense of digging tunnels. Maximum speed? About 100 miles an hour? Maybe when it was younger. With the Vostok underway again, life on the slow track resumes. A little coal to get the kitchen going. The compartments are only about 6 feet square, with 4 in second class, 2 in what passes for first class on this train. The only way to assure yourself some privacy is to book all the berths in a compartment. Otherwise, you can end up sharing with just about anybody. But just about anybody here seems friendly. Aboard the Vostok this time are a computer expert from Australia and his pal, a security guard from London. They find themselves in a compartment with a South Korean missionary and a scuba diver from Liverpool. Vasily, a Ukrainian businessman, and his wife Oksana are heading for Shenyang in China to try to sell some boats. Russian soldiers on leave, the wife of one of them, and their cat jam into another compartment. Natasha is a little nervous. She is leaving her family and her country to teach Russian in China. Now that we are free to travel, she says, the world is my home. Siberia is my room. Now I am going to another room. In the first-class car, Nadia and Tanya are the provodnitsas, the cabin attendants. They keep their rolling home clean and a motherly eye on their charges. They top up the big samovar with water for tea or coffee and sometimes deliver it personally. A small touch of luxury on a basically do-it-yourself trip. 2 young Germans venture out of their compartment from time to time, but for now, that's their home and they always seem glad to get back to it. A Russian makes it clear to a German tourist that knowing the language isn't necessary. There are universal ways to say, come, share a cigarette or a glass of water.
Half the point of taking a train trip like this is the people you meet. Not so much what you see out the window, but people you would not otherwise come into contact with in your normal day-to-day running, you know.
It's been a fantastic experience.
When somebody that you pass or try to pass in a gangway starts stalking at you and grabs you and drags you to the compartment, you're not quite sure what's happening initially. But yeah, sure, when they start giving you vodka and sausage, and then, okay, it comes apparent, and you can see that it's the hospitality that, as the days go on, you realise is typical of the Russians.
Once-in-a-lifetime experience, isn't it?
What's special about it?
Like everybody else has said, the people you meet.
Russian trains run on Moscow time. The sun can be going down, but the conductor's watch says it's early afternoon. You may find yourself sleeping at noon and lying awake, wandering around at midnight. The first morning aboard the Vostok. A makeshift shower with bucket and enamel cup helps you wake up. There aren't many creature comforts aboard the Vostok, but on this run at least, there's hot water in the 2 bathrooms in each car. There's no observation or club car, so you do your sightseeing through the window.